Welcome everyone coming in. It's so good to see folks with their cameras on. If you can turn your camera on, we would love to see you. At the same time, we completely understand if you can't turn your camera on. Great. My name is Andy Engel, and I want to welcome you all. I lead virtual public programs here at Reimagine. Reimagine, for those who don't know, is a nonprofit organization catalyzing a uniquely powerful community. People of different backgrounds, of different ages, races, sexual orientations, gender identities, people of faith, people of no faith, all coming together to heal ourselves, our communities, and the world. We support each other in facing adversity, loss, and mortality, and we hope to transform life's biggest challenges into action and growth. Reimagine resources, support groups, events like this one today are free, sliding scale, and accessible to the public. This is made possible by the support and generosity of participants like you. So for those who already made a tax-deductible donation when you registered for today's program, thank you so much. Your gift will immediately support Reimagine's mission to help people of all walks of life transform the hard parts into purpose and meaning. So our theme this month is anticipatory grief. Last week, we kicked off with the first of 3 gatherings in a series we're calling The Long Goodbye. And we hosted a panel discussion about the expectation of loss and the grief we experience before a death or an actual loss. Lisa Kiefhauer, our moderator, touched on her role as a family caregiver for her husband and her cancer diagnosis. Kyle Hill addressed how Indigenous practices support the ways in which Native American communities adapt to climate change. He also encouraged us to look forward to the spirit realm, a place of solace and hope. And Jamie Thrower discussed how folks in queer communities experience rejection from their biological families. Dr. Quinn Galloway Salazar emphasized the importance of being present for her clients as an end-of-life doula. Primarily, these folks are military folks and veterans. And Myra Sack shared how ritual is key to navigating anticipatory grief, in particular with her experience as a mother of a child with a terminal illness. And these rituals might involve movement. They might involve holidays. They might involve food, and even a special shade of red lipstick that you put on. And now for our second session, let's experience J'aime Morrison, who is a caregiver and dance educator, will lead a movement workshop for us for those expecting loss. We've also asked our community of collaborators to host their own events on Reimagine's platform related to this theme of anticipatory grief. You can too, by the way. And if you've got an idea for a program in the future, my colleague Nicole Tan from Reimagine will be pasting a link in the chat so you can learn more about how to do that. One event that I want to point out is next Monday. It's a virtual screening of a new film called The Last Ecstatic Days. It's a new documentary that follows Ethan Sisser, a young man with terminal cancer who wants to teach the world to die without fear. And he's accompanied in this film by end-of-life doula Dr. Aditi Sethi and a community of strangers who helped him transition. Before we begin, I just want to share a few Zoom tips. For those who wish, you can click on the CC icon at the bottom of your screen on your laptop to get a live transcription of what's being said. And in the chat, which I hope you folks will use, there are 3 dots in the chat window. And if you click on that, you can save the chat. Feel free to send me or Nicole a private message in chat if you have any questions. If you have having any technical problems, we'll try to help you out. And I want everyone to know that everyone who has registered for this session will get a recording. And that's about it. So I'm going to stop sharing. And now I'd like to welcome J'aime Morrison. J'aime is a professor of movement at California State University, Northridge. She holds a PhD in performance studies from New York University. That's where we first met decades ago. And she recently returned from Ireland, where she led workshops on ritual expressions of grief and rage at University College Cork. She is the founder of Morning Surf, a project exploring how grief is expressed physically and how movement is an essential part of the grieving and healing process. For an international organization called Hope for Windows, she developed a series of expressive movement workshops offered via Zoom throughout the pandemic, and she continues to build on this work by offering movement for grief workshops. This summer, she provided movement for grief at Camp Erin through Our House Center for Bereavement. And next month, you can catch J'aime at Endwell, this really wonderful conference where she will lead somatic movement. After losing her beloved husband, Jim, to brain cancer in 2015, J'aime completed an award-winning short film entitled Upwell. We'll paste that link in the chat. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. And it illustrates the role of how both dance and surfing had aided her in her journey of grief. And now, J'aime, I'm handing it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And thank you everyone for being here. And I want to thank especially Andy and Nicole for inviting me to be here with you today. I would love if you would use the chat throughout the workshop today, if you'd like to put in your name and where you're zooming in from. I'm also interested in any experience that you're willing to share of how anticipatory grief is showing up for you physically. Where do you feel this form of grief in your body? Because we know it's grief is such a physical experience as well as being an emotional one. So I'm excited to share today some of the ways in which our bodies hold anticipatory grief and explore some strategies for how we might be with this particular form of grief. I'm zooming in from Santa Monica, California, and I am a widow and I am a movement educator and choreographer. So this is the lens that I'm bringing to the work that we're going to do today. It's not necessarily a therapeutic lens, although I do feel that this work can really bring about a different relationship to grief. And so I want to offer to begin with just a grounding movement practice, just to sort of arrive in our bodies before we progress. And in order to do this, I'll invite you to put your camera on if you feel like it. It's wonderful to be in community with all of you. But you can sit, you can, there's parts of this where I'll invite you to stand up. You could also do this laying down with your eyes closed and visualizing the movement that we're doing. So please participate in any way that feels good for you. There might be some anticipatory anxiety about this anticipatory grief workshop and what we will do in the workshop and how it will feel. And I'm just naming this because that's what we're here to talk about, is how to deal with these feelings of ambiguity and uncertainty and how they show up for us. So we'll do a little bit of writing later on. So I also, if you have a pen or a pencil handy or however you want to write, that will be a little bit later in our session. So Um, to start with, I just want to do a little bit of movement together, and I'll demonstrate what it is, and then we'll do it all together, and take it from there. And I hope that you can all see me. I'm sitting down, so I'm just using the top half of my body right now. So we're going to start with our hands to our chest. And this is something that I like to do in the beginning of my classes to make space for our breath, to make space for our bodies, to make space for our grief, to make space for each other. So if you feel like doing it with me, we're going to start with our hands on our chest and just take a couple of breaths here. Feeling your hands on top of each other and feeling your chest moving into your hands as you breathe. And then we're going to push one hand out from our chest and then bring it back and then replace it and push the other hand out forward. And you can think about exhaling and inhaling so that we're clearing space with this gesture. We're opening up a space in our body. Beautiful. And then we can make space with both hands to the side and back. Noticing how much force you're putting into the movement or if it's gentle. Really imagining that you're pushing something away and you're creating space. And then coming back to yourself, to your body. And let's try it going up and coming back. And up and coming back. And let's even make space behind ourselves. Pushing behind. That's it. Beautiful. Coming back to the center and just pushing out towards each other. Pushing and coming back. And inhaling. Great. I'm just going to take a peek at the chat. Make sure everyone is doing well. Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. So a little bit about the way that I view movement for grief and how my approach was formed by my own experience before we do the next movement practice. As a dancer and choreographer, I have found myself highly attuned to the physical aspects of grief from an early age, and I began experimenting with how to be with grief, to integrate it rather than sort of move through it, incorporating it into my body. So the root word for incorporation is corporeal. So that idea of how do I take this in? How does this experience live in my body as well as in my brain has been something that I've been really thinking about. And I experienced it both before the death of my husband and after. Movement has been a way for me to find stability and to reorient my equilibrium after the loss of my father from suicide when I was 13, and then also after the loss of my husband who had brain cancer. And I've used movement as a way to think about processing and embodying grief because movement as metaphor, but also as method, enabled me to resist the imperative to move forward. Because a consideration of grief through the lens of movement is multi-directional. It's fluid, it flows, it goes through different rhythms, patterns, tempos. And in that sense, grief can transform. And it doesn't necessarily have to always be pulsing, churning forward, that it gives this more polyvalent perspective on grief. So that's how I sort of imagine working with movement and why I feel it's been so helpful. Um, I had the privilege of working with the choreographer Bill T. Jones when I was in college in one of his works. And I'll never forget, he said, choreography is research in the body. And I've always felt this sort of connection between finding movement to express what's going on inside. And you may find that as you begin to move, it's becomes a kind of excavation in which you don't always know what will emerge. And that can be a little bit overwhelming. But I believe that movement can help mitigate that sense of overwhelm, and really be a grounding force. And I think that being grounded is something that I really struggled with in my own anticipatory grief. I remember very specifically a moment of anticipatory grief. I was in a coffee shop that overlooked the chapel where I got married. And it was on my anniversary, my wedding anniversary, and I was sitting there alone, and my husband was 2 miles away in hospice. And I had this sense that he was going to be gone soon, and that I raced to the hospital to see him because I could, and I still had him there. I could hold him, and yet I knew that I was losing him. And it was really in that moment that I had this real sense of anticipatory grief, of being kind of in two places at once, being in the present, but also knowing that I was heading into this really uncertain future. Um, my husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor when I was pregnant with my daughter. And looking back, I can see that the 6 years that we had together was full of anticipatory grief, that I was very much afraid during those years of what the future would hold. But at the same time, we were able to experience the birth of my daughter, a marriage for 5 years, and the experience of both having this new family and being very much in love with my husband at the same time that I was watching him move from using a cane to a walker to a wheelchair to then not being able to get out of bed. The sort of slow progression of that, watching that unfold in slow motion, became very much present to me as an experience of anticipatory grief. I don't know if that sounds familiar to some of you who are caregivers, who maybe have your person still with you in some ways, but also there's been loss already. And I think that's kind of very much a space where you are sort of everywhere and nowhere. It can be a very confusing place to be, that the present is almost untenable, and yet the present is all we have in that moment. I think that anticipatory grief is an umbrella term, and there are other losses that are encompassed in that term. The loss of a relationship, the loss of part of your own identity, your own illness, your own limitation. And I also, especially after last week's beautiful conversation um, on Zoom, I also believe that ecological grief and climate grief is anticipatory grief in some ways, that there is a great component of that form of grief. Um, so that's kind of where I'm coming from and how I'm thinking about movement and how my own experience of anticipatory grief shaped these ideas. And so just to get started, we're going to do a little sense check-in. I'm going to check the chat and make sure there's no questions. Okay, wonderful. I love it. Okay. So for this, if you'd like to close your eyes, you can just stay seated or you can find a comfortable position. And let's take a breath and just actively soften our shoulders and our neck. And that might mean that you want to make a few adjustments. Roll your head, just really thinking about moving the shoulders down to create space between your ears and your shoulders. So this is meant to allow you to become present to what's going on inside right now. I'd just like you to bring your attention to everything that your body is touching right now. Could be the floor, could be the chair, could be your clothing. Can you feel the weight of your clothes on your body? Can you feel any jewelry that you're wearing, the weight of the jewelry? And then move to your sense of hearing. What are you hearing in the room with you? What are sounds that are near? And then sounds that are distant. What can you hear beyond your hearing? And you kind of telescope back and forth, tuning in to what is near and what is far. Could be your own breath, could be the sound of something outside your house. And as you breathe in, try to name two things that you smell. Just identify them. And one taste that you have in your mouth right now. And just thinking about yourself and where you feel grief in this moment, because it might change from day to day. Where are you feeling griefy? Where are you feeling grief as longing or sadness? Can you put a little extra emphasis in your breath and send breath to this area of your body? Try to soften a little bit with the exhale. And then maybe it's in the same place in your body, but where does grief show up as anxiety or as guilt or anger? Send a little breath and maybe even a little small movement to this part of your body. And then sort of mapping or scanning the body. Where can you feel grief as love? Breathing into that sensation of grief as love in your body. And choose a place in your body to feel grief as self-love in this moment. And then you can gradually take some breaths, open your eyes, come back into your space, and see if you can keep some of this softness throughout the experience today and the sense of breath in your body. We made space for breath in the beginning. And here we're connecting our breath to our inner experience. So I'm going to invite you now to just do some stretches that will physically open up our bodies. And I'm going to do them sitting to start with, but if you'd like to, you can stand, but I'm going to sit. And yes, breathing is so important. I agree. Thank you, Karen. So I'm going to just ask you to drop your head and curve your spine down on an exhale, and then inhale, open your shoulders and look up. So we're just, it's like a little spinal wave, exhaling and inhaling. So curling down and then unfurling, head is the last thing to come up. Just introducing some flexibility and mobility into the spine. And a little bit of background music for this as we stretch together. And that movement, stay small, expand it a little bit bigger. Inhaling, opening, with your spine. Seaweed building up from the bottom of the ocean. Okay. Take some deep breaths. I will lower the music. Sometimes people can't hear the music, so I was worried about that. I hope that that was a soft introduction to getting into your body and feeling a sense of space and open. I'd love to know if you feel like sharing how your body feels maybe different than you did when you first logged on. Music's okay. Music is definitely going softer. And again, I will put a link at the end, or I'll send it to Andy, to the playlist that I've created specifically for this workshop, because I won't get to all of the music that I have, but I'd love to share it with you. Good. Sense of expansion. I love that. Warmer. Yes, definitely playlist. So now I'd like to invite you to, we're going to stand up and do a little bit more embodied movement. Oh, great. So what I've been thinking about is how in anticipatory grief, and I'm using my own experience as my guide here, is I felt untethered. I felt kind of out of my body or adrift. I didn't really have a sense of where the ground was. And then I felt grief as this terrible heaviness, this sense of weight on me all the time. And there's this sort of play between weightlessness, feeling ungrounded, untethered, and really rooting into something that is supportive and sustaining about the ground. And so I want to play with these contrasts in movement. And so I'm going to invite you to play with and explore on your own, and I'll put on some music, how it feels to move as if you're sort of weightless, as if you're floating. Um, and then we'll bring it down and we'll think about, well, what is it like to, how does it feel to push something across the room imaginatively that's so heavy that you have to use all of your muscles to push it across. So this tension or this balance between the lightness and the weighted is what I want to experiment with and explore physically now. So I'll invite you, if you'd like to, you can stand up with me or you can remain seated. But I'm going to stand up. Good. Good. So I would just want you to think about feeling like you can start with our hands, feeling a sense of lightness, almost floating with your hands. And then maybe even your head and spine start to float. There is a sort of untethered ambiguity to this movement. Can something float downward instead of up? Can we float down? Is there somewhere in your body that you can make yourself lighter? Good, beautiful, lovely. And then as a contrast to that, what would it be like to make yourself very heavy as if gravity and was pulling you down and you're moving through the space or you're sitting down and you feel everything moving and heavy and you have to resist that. So imagine you're pushing something across the room that is very heavy and it's taking your full strength to do it. Yeah, that's it. Beautiful. Pushing something down. So often we pushing, everything gets pushed to the pushed down to the bottom. So we're sort of embodying things that we do emotionally and we're physicalizing them. Pushing it down, burying it, sublimating it, trying to break through. Good. And see if you can find a different body part now to push with. So let's try our back. You can try to push something off your back that's very heavy. Or a hip. Move your hip. Heavy, heavy, heavy. Or pull something towards you with great effort. Something that is resisting. Beautiful. Gorgeous, you guys. Yeah, that's it. Pull it in. And as we do that, let's contract. Let's get as small as we can in a chair or in our standing position. Can you squeeze your fists, squeeze your elbows together, curl your head, Squish your face up, get as tiny as you can, and then inhale, start to grow and expand and consume as much space as you can. Fill the room that you're in with your body. Get as big, let explore your edges, like how big can you make yourself? And then exhale, back, small, contract. Be as tiny, as bound and constricted as you can. And then almost like you're melting outward, growing. And then back in. Good. So I'm going to put on music much lower this time. And I just want to, for 2 minutes, I'd love you to just explore these contrasts. These are contrasts that we're holding every day within us. The feelings of carrying something heavy, the feelings of, at the same time, perhaps being untethered, being not being aloof, not really being present. Um, the feeling of things being so heavy that it's making you small. And then feeling like, how can we embrace all of it because it's all part of the experience? As Francis Weller says, grief invites us to collaborate with it. And so in this moment, can we dance with those? Can we embody those particular emotional, but also very physical sensations? So I invite you to have a little bit of an improv with these contrasts. So we have light and we have strong, we have contracted, and we have expanded. So just four tensions, four opposites, four contrasts.
Jamie, could you repeat those four?
Yes, absolutely.
Put them in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So we're playing with these contrasts that we are constantly negotiating. And so one of them is the sense of lightness and being almost like we're going to be pulled away from our bodies and from the earth. The other one is a sense of strength and heaviness, weightedness. One of them is a feeling of being contracted, of being pushed into like made into a little ball. And then the other one is expansion and trying to move past your edges. Thank you.
And Jamie, I wanted to just give everyone a heads up that when you play the music again, there may be a slight chance because of the audio settings that even if you're going to lower it a bit, we may not hear any narration that you're going to offer. So I encourage everyone to just go with the flow
Yeah.
and do your best.
I'll try not to talk. I get so excited when I see people doing such amazing things. um, so yeah, this is just your time. Feel it, whatever you want to do. You can be still. Stillness is a movement. Stillness is still embodied. But if you'd like to move, I invite you. It won't be for very long, and then we'll all come back together. But I'd love you to have this opportunity to really feel in your body how you negotiate some of these contrasts. All right, here we go.
Jamie, not hearing anything.
aggressive, it can be fast, it can be slow. Okay, I think we finally got the sound right. How was that to experience that silent disco? I promise I'll get you the playlist. I saw just from watching, I saw some beautiful movement, exploring. I don't know if you felt this, but I felt like I was able to get some anger out and some frustration and the faster movement. Um, so that is something that helps me to work through some of these feelings that I have in anticipatory grief. Um, because there's so many different feelings involved. Yeah, the music always helps. Good, good. Yeah, some days like the contraction is just so helpful, and then some days the expansion is wonderful. And then some days we all need to be a little more grounded, and we can really use the floor, you know, use the floor. It will hold us. So often I have felt in the dance studio, being so grief-stricken and like, where am I in space? I'm standing in space. I'm standing on the floor, and the floor is supporting me when when I feel like I have no one else supporting me. So there is a way in which I think we can really use the elements of gravity to play with and to help us understand that movement is a witness. I think that's ultimately what I have found in exploring a movement practice with grief is that my movement, whatever that is for me, it could be walking, it could be running, it could be swimming or surfing. Everything can be performed or done in a dance mindset. But I think that movement is our witness. We can sort of use movement as a mirror and to witness our own experience. Um, so I'd like you to get a pencil and paper, and this is going to be more of a mental dance rather than a physical dance. This next part. So I'm going to share my screen. This is this is my husband and my daughter and I. And this is a quote that I have found to be really beautiful and helpful by the wonderful Frances Weller. And I'll just read it out. When grief remains unexpressed, it hardens, becomes solid as a stone. We in turn become rigid and stop moving in rhythm with the soul. When we are in touch with all of our emotions, we are more verb than noun, more a movement than a thing. But when our grief stagnates, we become fixed in place, unable to move and dance with the flow of life. Grief is part of the dance. And that's from his book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And to me, that really resonates as a person who is thinking about movement and who loves to move. And that's really my way of expressing myself is through movement. But I think even if movement is not necessarily your mother tongue, that the idea of whether it's spooling out your story in words, that grief needs to move, whatever way you can find to do that. I think is what he's saying. And so when I was thinking about my experience of anticipatory grief, what kept coming up was the layering of emotions, the layering of experiences, the and-ness of it, living with grief and love, living with absence and presence, um, living with exhaustion and enthusiasm. So I found myself wanting to look at these images. These are double exposed photographs, and I think that they beautifully represent, to me, a kind of radical presence that we embody when we are in anticipatory grief, because we are both here and there. We are making memories that we will look at in the past, in the present, and we are also at times thinking about what will come. And so there is this way in which grief requires us to be almost time travelers and shapeshifters. And so for this metaphor that I'm interested in exploring with you, I feel like with anticipatory grief, we're always at least in two places at once, if not more. And these images to me so beautifully represent that idea that there's so much going on. There's so many worlds inside of us in one moment. We are all many different people, a community of moods and selves, part animal, reptile, rose, moon, mountain, canyon, ocean, wind, I would add. And so with this idea of double exposure, which I also, or multiple exposure, which I also think is a very interesting concept if we think about the word exposure and how anticipatory grief can make us feel so vulnerable, so exposed in so many different ways, so sort of radically exposed as well as present, that I would just love us to take a minute and I would like you to make a list of all the layers that you are experiencing right now. And this, I love lists because sometimes I don't have the energy to journal, but I still feel like putting pen to paper. And so lists give me a kind of shorthand for what I'm thinking and feeling. And so I would just love you to just list out for yourself. What are you experiencing right now? It could be kind of an emotional x-ray of all the different layers of exposure that you're moving through. And I have a couple examples, if I'll just throw them out, but you can certainly take that prompt however you would like to. One of the layers that I discovered in myself was the losses that I was witness to, that I was witnessing the loss of my husband's use of his legs. Um, the memories that we were making in the present in order to have something to return to in the future, losing a loved one in slow motion, having to make difficult decisions quickly, feeling hopeless to change the outcome, helping a parent remember who they are, being so busy that I forget to buy milk at the store when I went to the store to buy milk, holding a loved one's hand, worrying about the future, caregiving, working, having difficult conversations. I mean, we are all such a universe inside. And so I'm just asking to take 3 minutes and make yourself a list of these different layers that are kind of overlapping in your body. Mm. And I just take maybe another moment. Um, and I'd just like you to look at this list. Look at this list of everything that you are holding, that of everything that you are experiencing, going through. Um, and just just to honor that this experience is so multifaceted and layered and dense and doubled, and it's always changing, it's always moving, and it's never just one thing. This is like a snapshot of right now, and it could be different tomorrow. But to me, like writing everything down helped me see all that I was carrying and gave me a little permission to have some grace with myself. And I'll just sort of, as we're moving towards the conclusion of this experience, um, I love this quote from one of Rilke's poems. The inner, what is it, if not intensified sky, hurled through with birds and deep with the winds of homecoming? Um, and I just think that that movement can be this dialogue between our inner and outer selves. It can be a conversation between what's going on inside and what is going on outside of us. And to me, that's when I say movement is a conduit, it really can be a kind of conversation between our inner and outer worlds. And I hope that that, on some level, I hope that that is helpful for you. Um, just to end together, I'd love to do one last gesture into the screen. So if you feel like turning on your camera, just so we can see each other, I'd love us to just open our arms and take a big inhale. And then exhale, wrapping them around ourselves. Exhale. And as you open this time, let go of something, release something, name it, and then gather something in this time. When you come in to your body, hug yourself, gather something in, take something with you. And release. And exhale. This time, see each other, gather each other in as you gather your arms in. Let's do that one more time. Inhale, release, and then gather each other into you, adding in all of your beautiful stories, your beautiful movement into our collective wisdom of this experience, because that's, I think we learn so much from each other. So I want to thank you very much, and just turn it back over to Andy if you want to have conversations. But one thing that I was thinking about as I was preparing this is I'm sure that you have things that you do already that are helping you navigate anticipatory grief. And if you feel like sharing, I would love to have them in the chat. I'm going to work on getting my playlist um, sent to Andy so that you can have that before we leave, and the link to my film also. You can follow me at Morning Surf, MOUR, Morning Surf. And yeah, I would just really be so grateful if you felt like sharing, what it is for you that helps you connect. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie. Can we show some love for Jamie? Both here with our hands, with movement, uh, also in the chat. That would be great. Um, Jamie, I really appreciated my taking in from this experience was trying to approach my everyday life with a dance mindset. I love that. Um, and I even love that Shannon, who is with us, I don't know if she's still with us, but she was doing this in her car. We can dance anywhere, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
And I'm also curious if folks want to share in the chat as well. I love that prompt um, about where do you feel grief as love in your body? So I'm curious also if people want to share that in the chat. I'd love to take a look. Um, and I do want to share some additional announcements before we go. Um, Once again, thank you, Jamie. And thanks to all of you who have already donated to Reimagine. When you registered, you can still support Reimagine's efforts to provide free, accessible, and very engaging programs like this one to support all kinds of folks facing hard stuff. Um, Nicole, if you would be so kind as to paste in the chat also the link to our survey. We'd love to get your feedback there. We're constantly trying to tweak, improve programs. Please send that to us, and I'm happy to share with Jamie after the fact as well. Um, Please also join us for next week's final session in the Long Goodbye series. It's on Wednesday. And also check out our other events on the schedule. We've got two excellent speakers in conversation next Wednesday. We've got grief expert and author Claire Bidwell Smith. She'll be in conversation with death doula, writer, and filmmaker Darnell Lamont Walker. We have so many filmmakers. This is fantastic. Both Claire and Darnell will offer some reflections on the small, sweet steps we can take to transform our grief into action. So please join us for that. That's all I have. So we look forward to hearing from you. We look forward to seeing you next week. Jamie, thank you so much again.
I
And
just put the Spotify playlist in the chat.
great. And I can also include that in the follow-up email
Okay,
that
great.
goes out tomorrow as well. So thank you for that. Do you want to lead us out? We've got like 2 minutes. Do you want to lead us out with a little bit more silent? No, maybe regular disco, not silent disco. If we can.
Yeah, I love the idea of everybody kind of I can play a song and everyone can kind of turn off their Zoom, in an aesthetic way, like 1, 2, 3, 4, so we just disappear. But yes, let's move. Let me get this right. This sound. Okay, there we go. And where it went. Well, anyway, I don't know where the sound went. Oh, here it is. Sorry, guys. Okay, here we go. I think right now we should look at each other's movements. Do something that you see somebody doing on the screen.
I am
That
beautiful.
was so beautiful. I'm going to cry. The
Jamie, thank
movement
you.
really is medicine.
Jamie, thank you so much. And I want to honor the memory of Jim and such a beautiful, beautiful session. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Next Wednesday.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Andy.